Devin Forrest woke up to the sound of his alarm clock at exactly 6 in the morning, just like he had every day for the past 7 years. The habit of getting up early had become deeply ingrained in his life ever since he started working at Gartner Industries. He stretched and turned toward Alice, who was sleeping next to him, wrapped in a blanket. She didn't wake up when he kissed her on the temple. She had been sleeping more soundly lately, or pretending to sleep. Devin walked to the bathroom of their modest but cozy home on the outskirts of Redwood Grove. The town where he and Alice had settled 5 years ago was a typical American suburb, quiet, clean, with good schools and moderate real estate prices. It was the perfect place for a middle-class family, for their family. Under the stream of water, he thought about the project he had been working on for the past 3 months. Today was the day of an important presentation to management. Devin had prepared it flawlessly, 47 slides, a detailed market analysis, financial forecasts, efficiency calculations. He had always been a perfectionist, and that was what his company valued in him. When he returned to the bedroom, Alice was gone. He heard the sound of running water coming from the bathroom on the first floor. She had recently changed her habits and started using the second bathroom, although they had always shared one before. "I don't want to wake you up," she explained, although they used to enjoy starting the day together. They hardly spoke at breakfast. Alice drank her coffee while looking at something on her phone. Devin noticed that she was holding the screen at an angle so he couldn't see it. It was a small thing, but for some reason it bothered him. "I have an important presentation today," he said, trying to start a conversation. "Really?" Alice looked up from her phone. "Good luck." Her voice sounded distant, as if her thoughts were somewhere far away. "I might be late. Nolan said he wants to talk after the presentation." "Okay," she shrugged. "I have work to do today too, so I might be back late." Devin nodded. Alice worked in the sales department of a pharmaceutical company. She used to love talking about her work, about her clients, her colleagues, her successes. Now she hardly ever mentioned it. It was another small change that, for some reason, bothered him. On his way to work, Devin went over the details of the presentation in his head. It was an ambitious project, expanding the company's operations into new markets, including Asia. Devin had been working on it tirelessly, sparing no effort or time. But in recent weeks he had begun to feel that Nolan Reed, his immediate supervisor, had started avoiding discussions about the project for some reason. They used to meet regularly to discuss details, but now Nolan would redirect him to his assistants or claim to be busy. The company's office, a 5-story glass building on the main street of Redwood Grove, greeted him with its usual hustle and bustle. Devin greeted his colleagues, poured himself a cup of coffee in the break room, and headed to his desk. There was a note on his desk. "Come see me at 9. N.R." Devin glanced at his watch. It was 20 to 9. Strange. The presentation was scheduled for 11. Perhaps Nolan wanted to discuss the final details? At 9 o'clock sharp, he knocked on Nolan's office door. "Come in, Devin," came the voice. Nolan Reed sat behind a massive dark wood desk. He was 50 years old, fit, with graying temples and cold gray eyes. Karen from HR was sitting next to him. This alarmed Devin. The presence of HR usually didn't bode well. "Sit down," Nolan said, pointing to the chair opposite him. Devin sat down, feeling an inexplicable anxiety rising in his chest. "I have some unpleasant news," Nolan began, avoiding direct eye contact. "The company is reviewing its development strategy. We have decided to shut down the Asian project." "But—" Devin felt the floor sway beneath his feet. "We've already invested a lot of money, conducted research, established contacts." "The decision was made by the board of directors," Nolan cut him off. "Unfortunately, this means that your position is being eliminated." Devin looked at Karen, who sat with a stony expression on her face. "You're firing me?" he asked. still unable to believe what was happening. "We are forced to terminate your contract," she nodded. "Of course, in accordance with all legal procedures. Here are the documents." She placed a folder of documents in front of him. Devon mechanically took it but did not open it. "I don't understand," he said, looking at Nolan. "The project was approved by the board of directors 3 months ago. What has changed?" "A change in the company's direction," Nolan repeated. "New priorities, restructuring. You will receive 4 months compensation as stipulated in your contract, and of course, a letter of recommendation." "After 7 years of service, I deserve a more specific explanation," Devon insisted. Nolan sighed. "Look, Devon, this is business, nothing personal. The company has the right to change its strategy." But something in his voice, the way he avoided direct eye contact, told Devon that there was something personal going on here. He sensed that there was more to it than just a change in direction. "What about my team? Are they being laid off too?" "No," Nolan replied after a short pause. "They'll continue working on other projects." That was even stranger. If the department was being shut down, why was he the only one being laid off? He signed the papers almost mechanically, in a state of shock. Karen explained the procedure. He had to clear his desk by the end of the day and hand in his badge, office keys, and company laptop. "You can take your personal belongings, of course," she added dryly. "I'll send someone to help you." Devon left the office, feeling the stares of his colleagues. The news spread quickly around the office. He gathered his personal belongings into a box brought by a young guy from security, a few photos, a coffee mug, some books. 7 years of his life fit into one small box. On his way home, he tried to make sense of what had happened. 7 years of hard work, dozens of successful projects, overtime, weekend trips, and it all ended so unexpectedly, so suspiciously. Why did the board of directors suddenly change its decision? Why was he the only one fired? And why was Nolan avoiding eye contact? At home, Devon put the box in the living room and sank helplessly onto the sofa. He should have called Alice to tell her what had happened, but something was holding him back. Their relationship had become tense and distant in recent months. She often stayed late at work, especially on Fridays. When she came home, she smelled of perfume he hadn't noticed before. Little things he had noticed but dismissed, not wanting to think the worst. He went to the bar and poured himself a whiskey. It wasn't his habit to drink during the day, but today was a special occasion. As he swallowed the burning liquid, he remembered other little things that had been bothering him in recent weeks. Alice had changed the password on her phone. She had never done that before. They had no secrets from each other. "New security protocol at work," she explained. But Devon had seen how nervous she got when he picked up her phone to check the weather or call a taxi. A week ago, he found a receipt from Lazar, one of the most expensive restaurants in town, in her purse. She never mentioned that she had been there. The receipt was for dinner for two and a bottle of wine for $180. And 3 days ago, while changing the bed sheets, he smelled something on her pillow, not her perfume, but something masculine, tart, with a hint of sandalwood. She explained that she had been in the men's perfume department, choosing a birthday present for him, which was 2 months away. He glanced at his watch. 4 o'clock. Alice wouldn't be back before 6, even if she didn't linger. He had time to think about how to tell her about his dismissal, and how to ask her about all the little things that were bothering him. Devon walked over to the window. From the second floor of their house, they had a view of a quiet street with neat houses. It was a typical American suburb where everyone knew each other, said hello when they met, and had neighborhood barbecues on weekends. He and Alice had dreamed of a house like this when they first got married. They planned to have children, maybe a dog. But first they wanted to get on their feet and save up enough money. Now, at 34, he was out of work, and his wife. Devon didn't want to think about it, But the suspicion had already taken root, and he couldn't ignore it. Behind the books in the closet was a wad of cash, $5,000 that he and Alice had been saving for a rainy day. Devin took it out and counted it. The money was there. He put it back, closed the closet, and returned to the window. The phone rang sharply and unexpectedly. Devin glanced at the screen. Alex Donovan, his colleague and perhaps his only real friend at the company. "Dude, what happened?" Alex's voice sounded agitated. "You just disappeared. No one is explaining anything." "I was fired," Devin replied. "What? Why?" "Change in company direction." Devin tried to imitate Nolan's dry tone. "The project is being shut down." "What project?" "The Asian division." "That's strange," Alex said after a pause. "Very strange." "What do you mean?" "Nolan was in a meeting with the Japanese yesterday. I saw them in the conference room. They were discussing some schedules and plans." Devin felt a chill inside. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I took some documents to them. Nolan introduced me as one of the team members. It's strange you weren't there." "Now I know why," Devin smiled bitterly. "Listen, could you find out what's going on? But be careful." "Sure," Alex replied. "I'll call you if I find out anything." Devin put down the phone and returned to the window. So the project wasn't being shut down. He had simply been removed from it. But why? What had he done wrong? Or what did he know that he shouldn't know? He heard the sound of a car pulling up. Alice's silver Honda stopped in front of the house. Devin saw her get out of the car and take her bag from the back seat. She didn't hurry toward the house, as if gathering her thoughts before meeting him. He stepped away from the window, not wanting her to see him watching. The door opened and Alice walked in. She looked tired but beautiful in her business suit with her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Hi," she said, noticing him. "You're home already? What about the presentation?" Devin looked at her, trying to figure out if she was really surprised or just playing it well. "I got fired," he said bluntly. Alice froze. A look of surprise appeared on her face, but something in her eyes. Something didn't match the shock she was showing. "What? How did that happen?" Devin briefly told her about his morning meeting with Nolan and Karen, about the change in direction for the company. He didn't mention Alex's call. "That's terrible," Alice said, coming closer to him. "Are you okay?" She put her hand on his shoulder but didn't hug him like she would have before. Her touch was light, almost formal. "You know what's weird?" Devin said, looking her in the eyes. "Nolan couldn't look me in the eye. It was like he was ashamed." He watched her reaction closely. For a moment, just a moment, something like panic flashed in her eyes, but she quickly regained her composure. "Of course he's ashamed," she said. "Firing someone after 7 years of impeccable work, that's despicable." She said the right words, but Devin sensed the insincerity. Something was wrong. Everything was wrong. "What are we going to do?" Alice asked, walking into the kitchen. "We have savings, but not much. And the house payments." "I'll find a new job," Devin said. "Not right away, of course, but I'll find one. I have a good resume." "That could take some time. We have 4 months severance pay, and I'm eligible for unemployment benefits." Alice nodded, pouring herself some water. "Yes, of course. We'll be fine." But there was no confidence in her voice, and Devin didn't hear any real concern in it. "We'll manage" sounded like, "we'll get by somehow." "I'm tired," he said. "I'm going to take a shower." In the bathroom, standing under the hot water, Devin tried to piece together the puzzle. His unexpected dismissal, the changes in Alice's behavior, her aloofness, her late returns home on Fridays, the scent of men's cologne, the new password on his phone, the check from the expensive restaurant. And now this strange reaction to the news of his dismissal, as if she already knew, as if she was ready for it. Could it be that these two events were connected? Could Alice be cheating on him with someone from his company? Someone who had a reason to get rid of him? The thought was so painful that he tried to push it away, but it kept coming back, like an obsessive melody. And the more he thought about it, the more little details he remembered that confirmed his worst suspicions. Devin came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel. Alice wasn't in the bedroom. He heard her voice downstairs. She was talking to someone on the phone, quietly, almost in a whisper. He approached the stairs, trying not to give away his presence. "Yes, he already knows," he heard her say. "No, I don't think he suspects anything. Yes, of course." "It complicates things, but we're sticking to the plan. Friday, as usual." "Me too." She ended the call. Devin quickly returned to the bedroom, his heart beating so hard it felt like it was about to burst out of his chest. She was talking about him, to someone who knew about his dismissal. Friday, as usual. Tomorrow was Friday. He got dressed and went downstairs. Alice was making dinner, reheating yesterday's lasagna. They ate in near silence. Devin tried to keep the conversation going, asking her about her day and telling her about his plans to look for a job. But he sensed insincerity in her every word, in her every glance. When they went to bed, Alice turned away from him, saying she had a headache. In the past, he would massage her temples, and that would help. Now she didn't even hint at it. Lying awake for a long time, Devin stared at the ceiling. The ground was slipping away from under his feet. Everything he had considered unshakable, his job, his marriage, turned out to be shaky and unreliable. But the worst was yet to come. He could feel it, like the approach of a storm. Tomorrow was Friday. Friday, as always. And he was determined to find out what was going on Fridays when Alice came home late smelling of another woman's perfume. Friday morning greeted Devin with a gloomy gray sky and drizzling rain. He lay in bed pretending to be asleep while Alice got ready for work. Through half-closed eyelids, he watched her carefully choose her outfit, try on different jewelry, and stand in front of the mirror longer than usual. Usually on Fridays, she wore something casual, jeans and a sweater. Today, however, she chose an elegant dark blue dress and high-heeled shoes. When she finally left the bedroom, Devin opened his eyes and sat up in bed. Inside, he felt a tightness in his chest from the pain and uncertainty. He never thought he would find himself in this situation, losing his job and suspecting his wife of cheating on him. Just a week ago, his life had seemed predictable and stable, but now it was falling apart like a house of cards. He heard the front door slam downstairs, then the sound of an engine starting. Devin went to the window and watched the silver Honda disappear around the corner. He had about 8 hours before Alice returned. She usually came home around 9 on Fridays, sometimes later. Devin quickly got dressed and went downstairs. He had made up his mind. Today he would find out the truth, whatever it was. The oppressive feeling of uncertainty was worse than the bitterest truth. He opened his laptop and found an online store with fast delivery. An hour later, a courier service delivered a small box. Inside was a compact GPS tracker with a magnetic mount, a miniature voice-activated microphone, and a tiny camera the size of a button that could record several hours of video. An hour and a half later, Devin carefully attached the tracker under the wing of Alice's car. He installed the small microphone under the front panel and attached the camera to the rearview mirror, disguising it as a harmless decoration. Both devices were connected to his smartphone. He could listen and watch the recordings in real time or view them later. Back at home, Devin felt a strange mix of emotions. On the one hand, he was ashamed of his actions, spying on his own wife, installing hidden cameras. On the other hand, he had a right to know the truth, especially if his suspicions were confirmed. And the more he thought about it, the more little details he remembered that bothered him. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, his phone vibrated. The GPS tracker had been activated. Alice had left the company premises. Devin opened the app and watched with growing excitement as the red dot moved across the city map. Instead of heading home, Alice's car was moving toward the suburbs, where prestigious residential complexes were located. Finally, the dot stopped. Devin zoomed in on the map and saw that the car was parked near the elite apartment building River Towers, one of the most expensive in the city. A few minutes later, the voice-activated microphone kicked in. Devin put on his headphones and heard the sound of a door opening, then Alice's footsteps and the sound of a door slamming shut. Nothing happened for a few minutes. Then footsteps could be heard, the sound of elevator doors opening, and then a muffled female voice. 34th floor, please." Devin held his breath. The 34th floor was where the penthouses were. Who was she visiting? The recording cut off. Alice had left the microphone's range. Devin nervously tapped his fingers on the table, waiting for something to happen. He opened a search engine and typed in River Towers residence, but found nothing useful. Information about the residents of the elite building was not publicly available. Almost 2 hours later, the microphone activated again. Devin heard the sound of a car door opening, then Alice's familiar voice and a man's voice. Devin's heart skipped a beat. The voice belonged to Nolan Reed. "He's turning down most of the job offers," Alice said. "I've been checking his email and he either doesn't respond or says he needs time to think." "Good," Nolan's voice sounded smug. "The longer he's out of work, the better for us. When his severance pay runs out, he won't be able to pay his rent." "What if he does find a job?" Alice's voice sounded worried. "He won't," Nolan replied confidently. "I've taken care of that." A few calls to the right people, and his resume would be sent to the trash before it even got to the interview stage. Devin clenched his fists. So his suspicions were confirmed. Alice wasn't just cheating on him with Nolan. They had conspired to get him fired and were now trying to prevent him from finding a new job. "What if he suspects something?" Alice asked. "He said yesterday that Nolan couldn't look him in the eye." "So what?" Nolan laughed. "What can he do? He has no proof. The official reason for his dismissal is company restructuring. Everything is legal and above board. And in his personal life, well, people break up, marriages fall apart. Nothing unusual." Devin turned on the camera he had installed on the rearview mirror. An image appeared on his smartphone screen. Alice was sitting behind the wheel, and Nolan was in the passenger seat. He was wearing the same suit he had worn when he fired Devin the day before. "I'm still worried about this plan," Alice said as she turned onto the main road. "If he agrees to a divorce without a fight, he'll get half of our property." "It's a good thing you don't have children," Nolan said, putting his hand on her knee. "It makes things easier." "Yes," Alice nodded. "We always put it off. First we wanted to get on our feet, then we bought a house, and now I realize I don't want children with him." Those words hurt Devin deeply. He and Alice had often talked about children and made plans for the future. Had she been pretending all this time? "When we're done with him," Nolan continued, "you'll file for divorce. By then he'll have lost his job, maybe his house. He'll be broken and will agree to anything." "What about your wife?" Alice asked. "Are you sure she doesn't suspect anything?" "Gail?" Nolan waved his hand dismissively. "She's completely absorbed in her work. The board of directors, charity, social events. She doesn't care about my personal life as long as I don't cause her any problems. Besides, we have a prenuptial agreement that would be difficult to contest." "What about the clause on adultery?" Alice's voice betrayed her concern. "That requires proof," Nolan smiled. "And she doesn't have any, nor will she ever. We're careful." Devin felt rage welling up inside him. These two hadn't just betrayed him. They had planned his complete destruction, financially and emotionally. They wanted to leave him without a job, without a home, without a wife, and without a means of support. On his smartphone screen, he saw Nolan lean toward Alice and kiss her. She responded to the kiss, taking her eyes off the road for a second. Devon looked away. He couldn't bear to watch. But what if he starts to suspect something? Alice insisted when the kiss ended. Then we have a backup plan, Nolan said in a tone that made it sound like he was talking about something mundane. You can file a domestic violence report. But he would never, Alice began. It doesn't matter, Nolan interrupted. One report is enough to have him evicted from the house, and a black eye and a couple of bruises on your beautiful skin will convince any judge. And of course, I'll be your witness. I noticed signs of abuse. I heard threats. I don't know, Alice said doubtfully. That's too much. Just keep it in mind as a backup plan, Nolan said. I hope it won't come to that. If everything goes according to plan, in a couple of months he'll agree to a divorce on your terms. You'll get the house and a good settlement. I'll help him find a low-level job in another city, far away from here, and we can be together, without hiding. Devon turned off the screen, unable to watch anymore. The feelings overwhelming him were impossible to describe. Pain, rage, humiliation, betrayal, all mixed together in a toxic cocktail that poisoned his soul. He stood up and walked over to the window, trying to collect his thoughts. It was still drizzling outside, the gray sky pressing down like a stone slab. The world around him seemed to reflect his inner state. Devon took a deep breath. He needed a plan. He couldn't let those two destroy his life. He wouldn't give up without a fight. First, he had to preserve all the evidence. Devon returned to his computer, copied the recordings from the camera and microphone to an external hard drive, then to a password-protected cloud storage service. He made backup copies, making sure the information was secure. Then he reviewed the recordings again, taking notes. Alice and Nolan had committed several illegal acts. They had orchestrated his unjustified dismissal, planned to prevent him from finding a new job, and discussed false accusations of domestic violence. All of this could be used against them. But most importantly, there was the mention of Nolan's wife, Gail. Devon had never met her in person, but he knew that she was not just Nolan's wife. She was the daughter of the company's founder, Gerald Gardner, and in fact had more power than her husband. Nolan only had his high position because of his marriage to her. And Nolan had mentioned a prenuptial agreement with a clause about adultery. If Gail found out about Nolan's relationship with Alice, if she had proof. Devon felt a rush of anger again. He had never been a vengeful person, but these two had left him no choice. They wanted to destroy him, financially, emotionally, and professionally. And Devon had every right to defend himself. The GPS tracker showed that Alice was heading home. Devon checked the time. It was just after 7 p.m. earlier than usual for a Friday. Apparently, Nolan really did have a meeting, and their date had to be cut short. Devon turned off his computer and got ready to meet his wife. The hardest part would be pretending that he knew nothing, that everything was still the same. But he had to play the part, at least until he figured out how to use the evidence he had obtained to maximum effect. His thoughts returned to Haley Reed. She could be his unexpected ally. She had reasons to turn against Nolan if she found out about his infidelity and plans. The front door opened and Alice came in, shaking the rain off her umbrella. She looked a little tired, but there was a slight smile on her face, a smile that now only made Devon feel disgusted. "Hi," she said, noticing him in the chair. "Are you drinking already?" "Just relaxing a little," Devon replied, surprised at how calm his voice sounded. "How was your day?" "The usual," Alice shrugged, taking off her coat. "What have you been up to?" "Looking for a job," Devon said, taking a sip of whiskey. "A few interesting options." He noticed a flash of anxiety in her eyes. "That's good," she smiled stiffly. "Anything concrete?" "Maybe," Devon replied evasively. "It's too early to say." He deliberately avoided giving any details, knowing she would pass the information on to Nolan. Let them sweat, wondering how successful their plans were. "I'll make dinner," Alice said, heading for the kitchen. "Go ahead." Devin nodded. "I'll help." He followed her, watching her take food out of the refrigerator. The woman he had lived with for 5 years, whom he loved and trusted, had turned out to be a stranger, hostile. This realization made everything inside him tighten with pain. But now was not the time for emotions. Now he needed cold calculation and strategy. And Devin was beginning to form a plan that could not only protect him, but also turn the situation to his advantage. Devin spent Saturday morning without sleep. He tossed and turned all night, thinking about his wife's betrayal and the plans she and Nolan were making against him. Alice slept next to him, her back turned to him, as if even in her sleep she was trying to keep her distance. Her steady breathing only added to his bitterness. How could she sleep so peacefully after everything she had done? At 6 in the morning, Devin got up quietly, trying not to wake his wife. He gathered the things he needed: his laptop, an external hard drive with copies of his recordings, and his phone. He put on casual clothes, jeans, a shirt, and a light jacket. Last night he had told Alice that he was going to Bakersfield to meet with a potential employer. In reality, he planned to stay in town and find a way to contact Haley Reed. As he left the house, Devin noticed Alice watching him from her bedroom window. She thought he didn't see her, but a slight movement of the curtains gave her away. He got into his dark blue Ford, started the engine, and drove out of the yard, feeling her eyes on him. Devin didn't head straight for the city center. First, he stopped at a gas station, filled up the tank, and bought a coffee and a sandwich. Then he made a detour and drove past the house of their neighbors, the Turners. Last night he had arranged with Bill Turner to leave his car in his yard. Bill was a friend of his. They sometimes played golf together, and last year Devin had helped him repair his roof after a severe storm. "Need a place to park?" "Why?" Bill asked, surprised. "Just a little problem with Alice," Devin replied evasively. "I want her to think I'm out of town, but I need to stay here. It's hard to explain, but trust me, it's important." Bill, a divorced man in his 50s, nodded understandingly without asking any questions. "Family stuff, I understand. No problem, buddy." Devin left his car in Bill's garage, took a taxi, and headed for downtown Redwood Grove. Until that moment, he had no clear plan for finding Gail Reed. He had never met her in person, although he knew what she looked like from photos taken at corporate events. A tall, slender brunette with sharp, dark eyes, she was always impeccably dressed and carried herself with dignity. Gail Reed wasn't just Nolan's wife. She was the only daughter of Gerald Hartner, founder and former CEO of Hartner Industries. After her father's death 3 years ago, she inherited a controlling stake in the company and a seat on the board of directors. Formally, she did not hold an executive position, but everyone knew that no serious decision was made without her approval. Nolan got his job as vice president only because of his marriage to Haley. Before that, he was just a middle manager, ambitious but unremarkable. Marrying his boss's daughter paved the way for his rise to the top. Now Devin understood that Nolan wasn't just taking advantage of the opportunity. He was building his own empire within the company, getting rid of those he considered a threat. The taxi stopped at the central office of Gartner Industries. Devin paid and got out, looking at the familiar glass and concrete building. On Saturdays, the office was usually empty, with only the security desk and perhaps a few workaholics on duty. But Devin had no intention of going inside. His old pass had been blocked, and showing up in front of security could raise unnecessary questions. Devin found a small cafe across the street from the office, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window, where he had a good view of the building's entrance. He took out his phone and opened the social media page where he hoped to find information about Haley's whereabouts. They didn't have any mutual friends, but as a public figure, she had to maintain some kind of online presence. After half an hour of searching, Devin found a post from a charity organization mentioning Haley Reed. Today, The City Gallery was hosting a charity auction for children with cancer, and Haley was one of the organizers. The event started at 11 in the morning. Devin looked at his watch, 9:30. He had enough time to get to the gallery and figure out how to approach Haley without attracting too much attention. He called another taxi and headed to the gallery, located in the historic part of town. By the time he arrived, a small crowd of early guests had already gathered at the entrance, well-dressed men and women, clearly members of the city's elite. Devin felt out of place in his casual clothes, but that was the least of his problems. He bought a ticket, $100, all of which went to charity, and went inside. The gallery was a spacious room with high ceilings and white walls hung with paintings ranging from classic landscapes to modern abstractions. In the center of the room were tables with snacks and drinks, around which groups of guests were already gathering. At the far end was a makeshift stage where the auction was to take place later. Devin took a glass of orange juice and began to slowly walk around the room, looking around carefully. Haley was nowhere to be seen. He felt nervous tension in his stomach. His plan was risky. What if she refused to talk to him? What if she saw him as a threat? But he had no choice. She was his only chance not only to protect himself, but also to get justice. At around 10:45, a whisper went through the room, and many heads turned toward the entrance. Devin turned and saw Haley Reed entering the gallery, accompanied by two assistants. She was wearing an elegant light gray suit with a pearl necklace around her neck, and her hair perfectly styled. Her appearance caused a wave of greetings, and she began greeting guests, slowly making her way into the hall. Devin stepped aside and watched her. He decided to wait until she was relatively alone before approaching her. Right now, surrounded by people, she was unlikely to listen to a former employee of the company with some strange accusations. His patience was rewarded 20 minutes later when Haley moved away from the crowd to one of the paintings, a large abstract canvas dominated by shades of blue and green. She stood alone in front of it, thoughtfully examining the brushstrokes. Devin took a deep breath and walked over to her, trying to look confident but not threatening. "Mrs. Reed," he said quietly, stopping beside her. She turned to him, a flash of surprise in her eyes. "Yes? Do we know each other?" "Not personally," Devin replied. "My name is Devin Forrest. I worked for your company as a project manager until the day before yesterday, when I was fired by your husband." Her face instantly became more wary. "Mr. Forrest, I don't handle personnel matters. If you have any complaints about the termination procedure, you should contact the Human Resources Department or the company's lawyers." She was about to walk away, but Devin said softly, "It's not about the termination procedure, Mrs. Reed. It's the reason, and that reason is directly related to your husband and my wife." Gail stopped, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" "I'd prefer to discuss this in a more private setting," Devin replied. "I have evidence that you should know about. It concerns not only my dismissal, but you personally." She hesitated, studying his face. Devin knew how risky his words sounded. Any other woman might have called security or simply ignored him. But Gail Reed was known for her analytical mind and direct approach to problems. "5 minutes," she finally said. "Follow me." She led him across the hall to a small door off to the side that led to a staff area. Inside was a modest office, obviously intended for gallery staff. "Speak," Gail said, closing the door. "And believe me, Mr. Forrest, if you're wasting my time, there will be unpleasant consequences." "I understand," Devin nodded, "and I wouldn't bother you if it weren't serious." He took out his phone and opened a video he had taken the day before, a fragment of a conversation between Nolan and Alice in the car. "Before I show you this, I must warn you that the content is shocking, and I ask that you listen to me until the end." Gail nodded silently, her face impassive. Devin played the recording. Nolan and Alice appeared on the screen, sitting in the car. Devon selected the part where Nolan said that Haley didn't suspect anything, that she was completely immersed in her work, and that she didn't care about his personal life. Then came the part where they discussed the prenuptial agreement and the clause about adultery, and Nolan's confident statement that she has no proof and never will. Gail stared at the screen, her face changing as she watched. Her professional mask cracked, giving way first to surprise, then shock, and finally cold rage. When the recording ended, she was silent, staring into space. "Is this a genuine recording?" she finally asked. "Not edited? Not fake?" "Absolutely authentic," Devon replied. "Made yesterday. I have other clips where they discuss my dismissal and their plans for me. Nolan didn't arrange for me to be fired because of company restructuring, but because he's having an affair with my wife." Haley met his gaze, and Devon saw understanding in her eyes. She believed him. "How did you make this recording?" she asked. "I installed a hidden camera and microphone in Alice's car," Devon admitted. "I started noticing strange behavior, especially on Fridays. She would come home late, smelling of men's cologne, and after I was fired, my suspicions only grew stronger." "Under the circumstances, it doesn't matter," Haley interrupted him. "At least not to me." She walked over to the window and looked out at the street. Devon waited silently, knowing she needed time to process what she had seen. "How long has this been going on?" she asked without turning around. "I don't know for sure," Devon replied, "but judging by what I heard them say, at least a few months, maybe longer." Haley nodded as if this confirmed some of her own suspicions. "Do you have copies of those recordings?" "Yes, several. On an external hard drive and in cloud storage." She turned to him, her face impenetrable again. "Why did you come to me? What do you want, Mr. Forrest?" "Justice," Devon replied simply. "I lost my job because of your husband's personal vendetta. He plans to prevent me from finding a new job. He and my wife plan to wait until I lose my house, go broke, and then force me to agree to a divorce on their terms. And if I resist, Alice will file a false domestic violence report. I came to you because, based on the records, you are also a victim in this situation." Haley was silent, thinking about what he had said. Then she took out her phone and dialed a number. "James, it's Haley. I need to cancel my participation in today's auction. Something urgent has come up. Yes, everything is fine. It just requires my immediate attention." "Thank you for your understanding." She ended the call and turned to Devon. "Are you free now, Mr. Forrest?" "Yes, completely." "Then come with me. We need to discuss this in a more comfortable setting, and I need to see all the evidence you have." They left the gallery through a service entrance, avoiding the main hall with the guests. A black Mercedes with a driver was waiting at the back door. Gail motioned for Devon to get in the car. "To my office, Robert," she told the driver, once they were both settled in the back seat. Devon expected them to drive to the Gartner Industries building, but the car headed in the opposite direction, toward a high-rise in the city's financial district. "I have a private office outside the company," Gail explained, noticing his surprise. "Sometimes it's useful to have a space that's not connected to the main business." Gail's office was on the 30th floor of the Apollo Business Center, a spacious room with panoramic windows, minimalist design, and an impressive view of the city. There were no secretaries or assistants, just her and Devon. "Make yourself comfortable," Gail said, pointing to the chairs at a low table. "Coffee? Water?" "Water, please," Devon replied, feeling his mouth dry. She filled 2 glasses from the cooler and sat down across from him. "So, Mr. Forrest, I want to see all the evidence you have, every record, every fragment." Devon took out his laptop and an external hard drive. Over the next hour, he showed her the records and told her everything: how he had noticed changes in Alice's behavior, how he had been unexpectedly fired, how he had decided to install surveillance, and what he had discovered. Gale listened intently, sometimes making notes in a small notebook, sometimes pausing the recording to ask for details. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair and looked out the window at the city. 7 years, she said, as if thinking aloud. We've been married 7 years. I wonder how many of those he was faithful. Devon didn't know how to answer that rhetorical question. You know, Mr. Forrest, Gale continued, I always suspected that Nolan wasn't who he claimed to be. Too smooth, too helpful when he needed to be, and too harsh with those he considered beneath him. But I didn't want to believe he was that calculating. I'm sorry, Devon said sincerely. Gale looked at him and smiled slightly for the first time, a bitter but determined smile. Don't be. I'm not a victim, Mr. Forrest, at least not a helpless one. You did the right thing coming to me. She stood up and walked over to the window. Nolan was right about one thing. We do have a prenuptial agreement, and it does include a clause about adultery. If proven, Nolan loses all assets acquired during the marriage, including company shares and his position. My father insisted on including that clause. He's always been more astute than me in such matters. She turned to Devon. Your records are exactly the proof I need, but I want more. I want him to lose everything, not just his money and position, but his reputation. And I want you to be compensated for what you've been through. What are you offering? Devon asked, feeling hope grow inside him. An alliance, Haley replied. You and me against them. You have proof of their betrayal and conspiracy. I have the resources and power to use that proof to its fullest effect. Together, we can not only protect ourselves, but punish them. She walked over to the desk and pressed a button on the phone. Janet, connect me to Michael Dorset. Michael, this is Gale Reed. I need your advice, in person. Today? Yes, Sunday, I know. It's urgent. Okay, I'll see you at the office in an hour. She hung up and turned to Devon. Michael is the best divorce lawyer in the state, and an old friend of mine. He'll help us come up with a plan of action to make sure everything is legally sound. Devon nodded, feeling his confidence grow. He had found an ally, strong, determined, and with resources he didn't have. Thank you, he said. I didn't know if you'd believe me. I believe the facts, Mr. Forrest, Gailey replied. And the facts you've given me speak for themselves. In Gailey Reed, Devon had found not just an ally, but someone who understood his pain and shared his desire for justice. Together, they had a chance not only to protect themselves, but also to restore the balance that had been disrupted by the betrayal of those closest to them. A week passed after Devon's meeting with Gale Reed. It was a week filled with secret preparations and a masquerade of everyday life. Devon returned home and talked to Alice, pretending that nothing had changed. He told her about his supposedly unsuccessful job interviews and how difficult it was to find work. Alice pretended to sympathize, but Devon saw the satisfaction in her eyes. Nolan and Alice's plan seemed to be working perfectly. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, a completely different drama was unfolding. Haley and her lawyer, Michael Dorset, were putting a carefully crafted plan into action. The evidence Devon had gathered was thoroughly examined and compiled into legally watertight documents. Gale used her influence to secure the support of the company's board of directors, without revealing all the details, but hinting at serious violations on Nolan's part. On Wednesday evening, Devon received an encrypted message from Gale. Tomorrow, be ready. It was the signal. The operation was entering its final stage. On Thursday morning, Devon woke up earlier than usual. Alice was still asleep when he quietly left the bedroom and went down to the kitchen. He made some coffee, sat down by the window, and waited. He was about to begin the next phase of their plan. Provoke Alice into taking the action that she and Nolan had discussed as a backup plan. When Alice came downstairs, impeccably dressed for work, Devon greeted her with some unusual news. I got a letter from Gartner's lawyer. They admit that my dismissal was illegal and are offering compensation. Alice froze at the coffee pot. Really? That's unexpected. Yes, Devon continued, watching her reaction closely. It seems someone at the company discovered that the project wasn't closed. In fact, it's actively moving forward, just without me. He noticed Alice's face pale slightly. What are you going to do? I'm meeting with their lawyer this afternoon, Devon replied. I might even get my job back. Oh, Alice smiled awkwardly. I'm happy for you. Really? Devon met her gaze. I thought you weren't too interested in my career lately. What nonsense, she laughed nervously. Of course I'm interested. Then why have you been looking through my email and telling Nolan about the job offers I've been getting? Alice froze, her eyes widening. I didn't... What are you talking about? I know everything, Alice, Devon said calmly. About you and Nolan. About your plan to destroy me. About how you wanted to wait until I lost everything and then force me to agree to a divorce on your terms. Alice took a step back, her hands shaking, spilling coffee. You're crazy. This is nonsense. Really? Devon took out his phone and turned on the recording. Alice's voice came from the speaker. He already knows. No, I don't think he suspects anything. Yes, of course. Friday, as usual. Alice's face contorted, a mixture of fear and rage distorting her features. You've been following me, recording me. Yes, Devon replied. And I have recordings of your conversations with Nolan, about how he arranged for me to be fired, how he's preventing me from finding a new job, how you plan to file a false report of domestic violence if I started to resist. You can't prove any of that, Alice hissed, her mask of propriety completely gone. Those recordings are illegal. No court will ever admit them. Maybe, Devon nodded, but Gail Reed has already admitted them. What? Alice's voice betrayed genuine fear. I showed her everything, Devon said. How you and Nolan planned to ruin my life. How he bragged that his prenup was worthless because Gailey had no proof and never would. Well, now she has proof. Alice paled even more. You don't understand what you're doing, she said, reaching for her phone. Nolan is not someone you want to mess with. It's too late, Devon replied. Right now, Haley is meeting with the company's board of directors with those recordings and a lawyer. The game is over, Alice. She quickly dialed the number, but there was no answer. Nolan's phone was unavailable. You'll regret this, she breathed and ran out of the house. Devon didn't try to stop her. Everything was going according to plan. He immediately sent a message to Haley. She knows. She's on her way to Nolan's. Over the next hour, Devon methodically gathered his most important belongings. According to the plan he had worked out with Haley and Michael, he had to leave the house before Alice returned. They had anticipated her next move, a false report of domestic violence. He loaded the bags into his car and took one last look at the house where he had lived for 5 years. So many memories, and now they were all tainted by betrayal. Closing the door, he walked to his neighbor's car, where Bill was already waiting. Everything okay? Bill asked, seeing the grim look on his face. It'll be fine, Devon replied. Thanks for your help, buddy. He got into his car and drove off, heading for a small motel on the outskirts of town where he had booked a room under a false name. There, he would wait for a signal from Gail. Meanwhile, another drama was unfolding at the headquarters of Gartner Industries. Gail Reed had called an emergency board meeting. Nolan, unaware of anything, arrived with his usual confidence. His smile faded when he saw Michael Dorset, a well-known divorce lawyer. What's going on? He asked, looking from Gail to the board members. Sit down, Nolan, Gail said coldly. We need to have a serious talk. She nodded to Michael, who turned on the projector. Still frames from Devon's video recordings appeared on the screen. Nolan and Alice in the car, their kiss, their conversation about their plans against Devon. Nolan's face turned white. "What the hell is this? This is fake." "The footage has been verified as authentic," Gale said. "We have irrefutable proof of your betrayal, Nolan. We also have proof that you abused your position by illegally firing a company employee out of personal revenge and trying to prevent him from finding a new job." Nolan tried to stand up, but the security guard standing at the door took a step forward. "You can't do this to me," he hissed. "I have a contract." "Which includes a clause on marital infidelity," Gale finished for him. "You mentioned it yourself on the recording, remember? How you boasted that I had no proof and never would. Well, now I do." Michael Dorset handed Nolan a folder of documents. "This is the notice of termination of your marriage contract on the grounds of proven adultery. Under the terms of the contract, you forfeit all assets acquired during the marriage, including company shares and the right to hold any position at Gartner Industries." "You can't," Nolan began, but Gale interrupted him. "The board of directors has just voted unanimously for your immediate dismissal, Nolan. Security will escort you out. Your access card has been deactivated." At that moment, the door burst open and Alice rushed into the room, disheveled and out of breath. "Nolan!" she exclaimed. "Devon knows everything. She stopped when she saw the board of directors, the lawyer, and the images on the screen, herself and Nolan in compromising situations. "Oh no," she whispered. "I presume this is Mrs. Forrest?" Gailey asked with icy politeness. "How convenient that you've joined us. The police officers have just arrived to ask you both a few questions." Sure enough, 2 police officers entered the room. One of them addressed Nolan. "Mr. Reed, we have received a report from Mrs. Reed that you used your position to arrange for the unlawful dismissal of an employee and prevented him from finding employment with other companies. These are serious allegations, backed up by evidence." The second officer turned to Alice. "Mrs. Forrest, we have information that you plan to file a false report of domestic violence against your husband. This is a federal crime punishable by imprisonment." Alice turned even paler. That's not true. The recordings we have show you and Mr. Reed discussing exactly that plan," said the officer. "I'm going to have to ask you to come with us to the station to make a statement." Nolan tried to maintain what little dignity he had left. "This is a misunderstanding. My lawyer, he can meet you at the station," the officer finished, gesturing for him to follow. As Nolan and Alice were led out of the courtroom, Haley dialed Devon's number. "Everything is going according to plan," she said. "They're both under arrest. The council unanimously supported me. You can come back to the city." Devon, who was waiting in his motel room, felt the tension of the last few days begin to ease. "Thanks, Gale. I don't know how I can ever repay you." "I'm the one who's grateful to you," she replied. "Without your evidence, I would never have known the truth. By the way, I have a proposal for you. Come to the company office in 2 hours." Devon ended the call, wondering what the proposal might be. He gathered his things, paid for his room, and drove back to the city. As he drove past his house, he saw a police car at the entrance. Apparently, a search was being conducted in connection with Alice's arrest. He didn't stop. There was nothing left there that truly belonged to him. All his memories were poisoned by betrayal. A warm welcome awaited him at the Gartner Industries office. Employees who had heard about what had happened expressed their support. Many had never believed the official version of his dismissal. Devon had always been a respected professional. Gailey met him in her office, which had previously been Nolan's. Sitting at a large dark wood table, she looked as if she had always worked there. "Come in, Devon," she said with a slight smile. "I'm glad you could make it." He sat down across from her, feeling a strange mixture of emotions: relief, exhaustion, and uncertainty about the future. "How are you?" Gale asked. "Honestly, I don't know," Devon replied. It all happened so fast. A week ago, I had a wife, a job, a home, the illusion of a normal life. Illusion is the key word, Gail nodded. Believe me, it's better to know the bitter truth than to live in sweet deception. What will happen to them? Devin asked. Nolan has lost everything, Haley replied. His job, his stocks, his reputation. He's facing prosecution for fraud, abuse of office, and conspiracy. Alice is also under investigation for planning a false report of domestic violence. Neither is likely to escape prison time, although, knowing Nolan, he'll try to cut a deal with the prosecutors. She paused, then continued, "But that's not why I called you here. I have a proposal for you." Gail handed him a folder of documents. "I want to offer you the position Nolan used to hold, Vice President of Business Development." Devin looked at her in surprise. "But I've never worked at that level." "You're more than qualified," Gail replied. "I've studied all your projects during your 7 years with the company. You've always exceeded expectations, implemented innovations, and built relationships with clients. Nolan suppressed you because he saw you as a threat. You were better than him." "I don't know what to say," Devin admitted honestly. "Say yes," Gail smiled. "The company needs people like you, especially now when we have to rebuild our reputation after the Nolan scandal." Devin took the folder and flipped through the contract. The terms were more than generous. "I need some time to think about it," he said. "The last few days have been too intense." "Of course," Gail nodded. "Take a week, 2 weeks, whatever you need. The offer will stand." She stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. Devin also got up, feeling a strange sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, he had the feeling that his life could get better. "Thanks, Gail, for everything." "We both got what we wanted," she replied. "Justice, and a chance to start over." Devin left the office and headed for the elevator. Outside the skyscraper windows, the city was bathed in the rays of the setting sun. The city suddenly looked different, not like a place of betrayal and pain, but like a space of new possibilities. The trap had snapped shut, but not for him, not for those who had tried to destroy him. For Devin, a door had opened to a future that had seemed impossible just a short time ago. 6 months later, Redwood Grove was covered in snow. He stood at the panoramic window of his new office on the 32nd floor of the Gartner Industries building and watched large snowflakes slowly fall on the city. Under his leadership, the company was completing the biggest deal of the year, a merger with a Japanese technology corporation that would open up new markets in Asia. It was the very project he had once fought for and been fired for. Devin straightened up and stretched. The clock on the wall showed it was almost 7 in the evening. Most of the employees had already left for home, preparing for the Christmas holidays. He closed his laptop and gathered his documents into a leather folder. It was time to end the workday. The phone on the table vibrated softly. A message from Haley. "Are you still at the office? Stop by my office before you leave." Devin smiled. Over the past 6 months, their relationship had come a long way, from a forced alliance against common enemies to deep mutual respect and something more that neither of them had yet dared to name. He went down 2 floors to Gail's spacious office. She was sitting at her desk, studying some charts on a large monitor. "Can I help you?" Devin asked, pausing in the doorway. Gail looked up and smiled. "Not at all. Come in." She looked tired but happy. On the desk in front of her were documents marked with the logos of Gartner Industries and Tokyo Tech. "The contract is signed," she said, pointing to the papers. "The board of directors unanimously approved the deal. As of January 1st, we are officially entering the Asian market." "Congratulations," Devin smiled sincerely. "You've done a tremendous job." "We did," Gail corrected him. "We couldn't have done it without you. Your presentation to the Japanese was brilliant." She rose from the table and walked over to a small bar in the corner of the office. "I think this calls for a celebration." Haley took out a bottle of expensive champagne and 2 glasses. "To a successful partnership," she said, handing him a filled glass. "To partnership," Devon echoed, clinking glasses with her. They took a sip, looking at each other over the glasses. Something warm, almost intimate, flashed in Gail's eyes, but she quickly looked away, returning to a professional tone. "I have news about our former partners," she said, placing her glass on the table. Devon realized she was talking about Nolan and Alice. "Anything important?" "Nolan agreed to a deal with the investigators," Haley replied. "He pleaded guilty to abuse of office and fraud in exchange for a shorter sentence. He got 18 months. With good behavior, he'll be out in a year." "And Alice?" Devon asked, trying to keep his voice steady. 2 years probation and community service," Gail said. "She managed to convince the court that she was under Nolan's influence. She's working as a cashier at a supermarket in another city now." Devon nodded. Strangely, he felt neither malice nor satisfaction, only a weary sadness that the people he had once trusted were capable of such betrayal. "Are you okay?" Haley asked, watching his reaction closely. "Yes," he replied after a pause. "I'm just thinking. Sometimes we don't really know people, even those closest to us." Haley nodded understandingly. "You know what I've realized over the past 6 months? Betrayal doesn't define us. It's how we respond to it that defines us." She moved closer and gently touched his hand. "You could have broken down, become cynical, vengeful, but instead, you built something new. You gave the company back a project that could have been buried out of spite. You helped dozens of people keep their jobs." Devon looked at her hand on his. "And you could have used the company for a personal vendetta, but instead you made it stronger than ever." Their eyes met, and for a moment there was a deep understanding between them that went beyond a business relationship. Then Gail gently pulled away, maintaining a professional distance. "I have some more news," she said, returning to the table. "The board has approved your promotion. As of the new year, you will officially become the executive director of the Asian division." Devon looked at her in surprise. "Really? But I thought Frank from marketing was getting that job." "Frank is good, but he lacks strategic thinking," Gail replied. "You've proven that you can see the big picture and make tough decisions. The paperwork is ready," she said, pointing to a folder on the edge of the desk. "Thanks for your trust," Devon said sincerely. "I won't let you down." "I know," Gail smiled. "That's actually why I asked you to come in. I wanted to tell you the good news in person." She paused, then added in a slightly more personal tone, "And I wanted to invite you to dinner, not a business dinner. Just dinner, if you're free tonight." Devon felt his heart skip a beat. In the 6 months they had known each other, this was the first time she had ever asked him out so directly. "I'd love to," he replied. They had dinner at a small restaurant in the historic part of town. It was a cozy place with subdued lighting, where no one knew them and where they could talk not about work, but about life, their hobbies, the books they were reading, the movies they had seen. For the first time since they had met, they were simply a man and a woman, not business partners or allies in the fight against common enemies. Returning home, Devon felt a strange excitement he hadn't felt in a long time. His new apartment in the city center was spacious and comfortable, but it still didn't feel like home. There were too few personal belongings and too much empty space. He hadn't had time, or hadn't wanted, to fill the void. Devon walked over to the window. The snow was falling harder, turning the city streets into a winter wonderland. At moments like this, the city seemed clean and renewed, just like his own life. His phone vibrated softly. A message from Haley. "Thanks for tonight. I haven't had such a good time in a long time. Devon smiled and typed a reply. Thanks to you too. Let's do it again sometime. The reply came instantly. Definitely. He put his phone down and returned to the window. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't seem like a frightening unknown. There was a glimmer of hope. Winter turned to spring, spring to summer. Devon and Haley's relationship developed gradually, cautiously. Both had been hurt by betrayal. Both were afraid to trust someone completely again. But day after day, week after week, they got to know each other better and opened up more to each other. In the business world, their partnership brought the company unprecedented success. The merger with Tokyo Tech opened up new markets, increased profits, and created dozens of jobs. Devon and Gale became known as one of the most effective management duos in the industry. In their personal lives, they moved more slowly but more confidently. They had dinners together, weekends out of town, and long conversations about the past and the future. They were in no hurry to label what was happening between them, but both felt that it was something special, deep, worth patience and caution. Exactly 1 year after those fateful events, Devon and Gale sat on the terrace of her country house, watching the sunset over the lake. The evening was warm, the air filled with the scent of blossoming apple trees. "Do you ever regret it?" Haley asked suddenly. "What?" Devon turned to her. "The way everything happened, finding out the truth about Alice and Nolan." Devon thought for a moment. "No," he answered honestly. It hurt a lot. But it's better to know the truth, no matter how bitter it is, than to live in a lie." Haley nodded. "I don't regret it either. You know, my father always said, in business, as in life, the truth is cheaper than lies in the end." He insisted on that clause in the prenuptial agreement not because he didn't trust Nolan, but because he believed in the importance of honesty. She paused, watching the sunset, then added, "And if it weren't for that clause, your notes, everything that happened, we would never have met." Devon looked at her. In the rays of the setting sun, her profile seemed particularly clear, almost classical. Gale's beauty was not as bright and striking as Alice's. It was deeper, more restrained, like a fine wine appreciated by connoisseurs. "You know what's ironic?" he said. "Nolan and Alice thought they were ruining our lives, but they actually gave us a chance to build something new, something better." Haley turned to him, the sunset reflected in her eyes. "Something real," she added quietly. Devon gently took her hand in his. She didn't pull away. "I don't want to rush things," he said. "We both know how much it hurts when you trust the wrong people. But I want you to know that what I feel for you is real, and I'm willing to move at a pace that's comfortable for both of us." Haley squeezed his hand. "I don't want to rush things either," she replied. "But I'm not afraid to trust you anymore. We've been through a lot together. We've seen each other at our worst. And if anything can be the foundation of a real relationship, it's seeing someone for who they really are and choosing them anyway." They sat there, holding hands, until the last rays of the sun disappeared behind the horizon. There was no need to say anything more. They understood each other without words, the way people who have gone through trials by fire and emerged not broken but stronger understand each other. At the same time, in another city, in a small apartment above a laundromat, Alice Forrest was returning from work. Her 12-hour shift at the supermarket had left her physically and mentally exhausted. She hated her new life, boring, poor, and devoid of prospects. It wasn't supposed to be this way. The plan had been perfect. She and Nolan were supposed to have it all: money, status, each other. Alice checked her phone. No messages from Nolan. He had been in prison for almost a year, but even before his conviction, their communication had become increasingly rare and tense. As soon as their plan had failed, Nolan had started to distance himself, blaming her for what had happened. And when he was sentenced to prison, he had practically stopped communicating with her. She opened the refrigerator, half empty, like her life right now. She took out a ready-made meal, heated it in the microwave, and sat down in front of the TV, mindlessly flipping through the channels. A familiar face flashed across one of the business channels. Alice froze in shock. It was Gail Reed giving an interview about the successful merger of Gartner Industries with a Japanese corporation. Standing next to her was Devin, confident, successful, wearing an expensive suit, looking like a man who knew his worth. Our executive director of Asian operations, Devin Forrest, was a key figure in this deal, Gail said, looking at him proudly. Alice turned off the TV with a trembling hand. The bitter irony of the situation was unbearable. She and Nolan had wanted to destroy Devin and Gail, but in the end, they had lost everything while their victims were thriving. In cell number 126 of the State Correctional Facility, Nolan Reed lay on a narrow cot, staring at the ceiling. Day after day, it was the same thing. Gray walls, metal doors, the monotonous routine of prison life. He, who was used to power, luxury, and respect, was now just a number in the system. Nolan's cellmate, a heavy-set man with tattoos, finished reading a letter from his wife and glanced at him. "Is that from your wife?" he asked. "Ex-wife," Nolan replied curtly. "And no, she doesn't write." "What about that blonde?" his cellmate continued. "The one who came to visit during your first month?" "She doesn't write either." Nolan closed his eyes. Alice had stopped coming to visit him after he had once again blamed her for their failure. "If you had been more careful, if you had noticed the camera, if you hadn't been so obvious about cheating on me." Deep down, he knew he had only himself to blame, his self-confidence, his greed, his disregard for others. But admitting that would mean facing the truth about himself, and Nolan wasn't ready for that. Sometimes, in rare moments of clarity, he wondered how things could have turned out differently. If he had appreciated what he had, a successful career, the respect of his colleagues, a wife who, despite her reserve, loved him. If he hadn't given in to the temptation to get more, at any cost, even at the cost of betrayal and lies. But those moments were rare. More often, Nolan returned to his usual way of thinking, making plans for revenge, imagining how he would get out of prison and make Devin and Haley pay for everything. The plans were unrealistic, the fantasies of a man unwilling to admit defeat, but they helped him get through the monotonous days in prison. Meanwhile, in Redwood Grove, in a cozy restaurant overlooking the lake, Devin Forrest knelt down on one knee in front of Haley Reed, holding a small velvet box in his hands. They had come a long way over the past year, from forced allies to partners, from partners to friends, from friends to lovers. They had taken their time, giving each other space to heal the wounds of the past, but now Devin was certain. He was ready to take the next step. "Haley Reed," he said, looking into her surprised eyes, "you showed me that even after betrayal, it's possible to learn to trust again. That even from the darkest moments, something bright and real can be born. I love you and want to spend the rest of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears glistened in Haley's eyes. She looked at Devin, the man who had come into her life at the darkest moment and become first an ally, then a friend, and now the love of her life. "Yes," she replied simply. Devin slipped the ring onto her finger, elegant but not pretentious, just like Haley herself. They both knew that their union would be more than just a marriage. It would be a partnership between two people who had seen each other through the hardest times and chosen each other consciously, with open eyes, without illusions, but with deep, true love. They were starting a new chapter in their lives, not perfect, not cloudless, but real, based on mutual respect, honesty, and the understanding that in a world full of uncertainty, the most valuable thing is to find someone you can trust even in the darkest times.